Alright guys, welcome back to the Yu-Gi-Oh side of my channel. It's actually been a long time since I've done some content. Um, Mostly because after the most recent ban list hit LP, I've kind of just been in a very, how do I say, it's been kind of a rut trying to prepare the deck for the current format. Um, but I've come up with some things to work with Dragon Maids, but that's not really why I'm here today. Um, Don't worry though, that deck will still be fine. I'm here to talk to you about probably my second favorite deck for ever that they've released in a long time. Um, Exosisters. They're nuns, war nuns, combat nuns, whatever you want to say. They have a very cool mechanic where they can exceed summon using one card like Zodiac, but only on your opponent's turn in response to an effect that would cause them to leave the graveyard. Be it they add a, or rather cause a card to leave the graveyard. So it can be from, either graveyard. It just has to be from your opponent. So if your opponent Monster Reborn's from either graveyard, or they DD Crow, or they like play Modern Yu-Gi-Oh, you can proc their effects. And what's even cooler is that they have a trap card that e-tellies out two of them, and you can chain it in response to those effects, or summon them in preparation for them to actually use their effects, which is cool. So I mostly wanted to talk about variants and like the deck in general, right? Because this deck is very complex. It is not a very straightforward deck. It doesn't have any obvious starter cards. There's no Rhoda in this archetype. There's no Stratos. There's no E-Telly. There's nothing to set traps. Like, as far as the main deck cards, those things do exist in the extra deck, but they don't exist in the main deck. And that's very important because it means in order to play the game, you have to draw an Xyz summon. You have to draw the ability to perform a rank 4, which isn't as hard as it sounds. There are obviously a lot of tools to facilitate rank 4 summoning, since rank 4 is easily the best rank in the game. So it's pretty easy, and thankfully they're all the same level, and all the Xyz are the same rank with the same materials, and they're completely generic. So we'll start from the top. I play 2 Elaine. I don't play 3 of this card because it's worse than Sophia as a starter. Because like I said, this deck doesn't really have a starter, and what that means is it pluses incredibly slowly, right? The trap is the card that's the most explosive, but aside from that, everything is super slow. And that's the reason I chose not to play Pot of Prosperity. I know a lot of people have been considering playing this card. I don't agree with it. There are a couple reasons why I don't think Pot of Prosperity is good in this deck. For one, you can't banish any of this. I think these ratios right here are like the least you could get. I think you absolutely need 3 of this card. This card is like your Vanguard. It is in most cases, it's the best thing to summon because it's a quick effect banish on the turn it's summoned, and it also searches your best cards, specifically the trap card. And then you need 2 of these because this is your extender and sometimes your starter, depending on the type of hand that you draw. So you have to like play more than 1. I play 2 of this card because this card is, in instances where this card isn't the best to summon, this one typically is on your opponent's turn because it turns off their graveyard. And I find this one to be the one you can get away with playing 1, Jareen, mostly because she's a negate, which is good, only on the turn that she's summoned. So in that way, she's not necessarily, like if I have an infinite impermanence or an effect failure, I don't always need to go into this card over any of her sisters. So yeah, I think you could get away with playing her at 1, even though she does have an attack modulation effect, which is very important. This deck doesn't really push for game very quickly, if that makes sense. I suppose you could consider playing the Utopia double package. I play Desires, so I'm always a little bit iffy about that, especially since it's not always in your best interest to make the Utopia play. So I prefer the slower game, but you could absolutely get away with playing Double or Nothing and pray you just don't banish it. The extra deck's kind of tight though. So let's go back to the main deck, right? I mostly talked about these because these two monsters right here are your starters. In that sense that like she searches one of your speller traps and she searches one of your monsters. So your Exceeds plays all lead to this. So I play 3 Elise. Elise is your extender in the best sense of the word. You control another name. She summons herself. There isn't much to say about that. You have to play this card at 3. Stella. Stella is technically your best starter because if she's in your hand and you have another name in hand, she can summon it no matter what its name is. She can even summon a second copy of herself. So in this way, she's your starter, but because she doesn't actually increase your card advantage, she's more of a extender in the same way as Elise. For example, if you open a Sophia and Elise, you normal Sophia and you summon Elise as the extender. If you open Stella and Sophia, you normal summon Stella, use her effect to summon a Sophia. But realistically speaking, it's the same thing, right? So Stella is just an extender that requires your normal summon. She's not really a starter in that way. Whereas Sophia's a bit tricky. Like I said, and one of the reasons why I don't play Potter's Prosperity is because this deck is slow, so the draw effects add up. Maybe not Elaine's draw effect, but it does come in handy when you draw too many of one card. Being able to freely shuffle it out for something else does come in handy. But Sophia is a true +1 with her draw effect. So in this way, I consider her to be the true starter of the deck. If you open her with a way to get another name on board, main deck, or even if you can do a separate Exceeds play while keeping her on the field, she's the best normal summon you could commit to. And then for your extender, I think Nefarious Archfiend Eater is probably the best extender, one of the best generic extenders, let's just say, and it's mostly because of its second effect. All of the Archfiend cards are not Archfiend, the little Charmer pet cards, they can special summon themselves if you control a spellcaster, but you can only control one. But they're not a hard once per turn. So you can summon as many of these as long as you can exceed the ones that you summoned before it away and then summon another one. So they're very good for using the cards in your hand. Like if they're not hand traps, you're never really stuck on extenders. If you open this card, you can just keep putting them out there as long as you can make Exceed plays, which I believe is really strong. It also helps increase your turn 1 potential by allowing you to make something like Utopic Future Dragon earlier than you otherwise would be. So it's a pretty effective starter. I mean extender. But I think the best thing about it is its second effect. Once per turn during your end phase, if this card's in your graveyard, you can target one face-up monster you control and destroy it. This effect is actually really powerful. Simply because if you compare it with the trap is an E-tally for 2, but it has the downside that during the end phase, the 2 cards that you summoned have to be shuffled back into the deck. So if you don't proc their effects, if you don't use it in response to an effect, or you summon it ahead of time to try and stop your opponent from using something like deter your opponent from using something like a miscellaneous source effect, and they just end their turn, you can use Nefarious Archfiend Eater to pop one of the ones that would otherwise be shuffled back into the deck, and you keep the body, which helps you for a follow-up rank 4 play. So it's like not exactly follow-up, but it also does provide follow-up in that way. So I think it's the best extender by that much. I picked the 3 best hand traps for the current format, I would say. Ash, Veiler, Infinite, and Permanence. They all work fine in here. And so the secondary engine I decided to play, the ZS engine. And the reason I decided to play this engine is, one, it does not require the normal summon at all. But it also doesn't require you to open a spellcaster. And what I mean by that is you can just summon this card out as a free body. And then if you have another one or you open Rhoda, you can special summon the second one out and make a rank 4 play without your normal summon, which is what I like, because that means this engine actually combos with itself. So if you open Sage and Ascend Sage and Arm Sage, that's a 2-card combo where you make Capistel will search Sophia, summon Sophia because you control a name, and Capistel, you draw a card. And you can get this result out of opening Sage and Orange Sage and Ascend Sage, or Ascend Sage and Rhoda, or Arm Sage and Rhoda. So like it's a nice little engine. I wouldn't play more than this. I wouldn't play the card that searches them, because that card's a -1. You have to put It is a -1. You have to put a card back into your deck. And this deck doesn't play any garnets. So I see no reason to want to play a card that requires me to put stuff back into my deck from my hand just to search one of these. I also don't think you need more than one Arm Sage. I think this is the perfect ratio for this engine. 1 Rhoda, 3, 1. 3 of the equip spell, not equip spell, this quick play spell. This card is very interesting. So on release, I think a lot of people thought this card was actually the stronger of the two. Maybe not, but that was kind of the vibe I was getting when everyone was reading over the cards. Having played the deck for about a week now, or around there, I'd say the trap is absolutely stronger. But this card's good too, because you can turn what you already have on board into a play. So you can like floodgate out your opponent. You can, you know, get a quick play banish. I think it's really good. I don't think it's ever really worth searching over the trap though. But if you draw it, it's really strong because then you don't have to like play. You don't have to risk it with the trap. And you can also just do something with the exceeds you may have on board from turn 1. So obviously you have to play this at 3. This card right here. So I am very mixed on this card. I think it's a very good card. I'm going to say that right now. This is not a bad card. This is a very good card. I used to think it was win more. I now think it's a little less win more. But I also think like it's still kind of like is in that realm of impractical just because it's so hard to get to this card consistently. You're basically hoping you draw it. But in some ways it can act like a called by the grave in air quotes. Because this deck can, if in some of your setups, you can get blown out by Nibiru. In some, I mean, sort of, because if you have the trap, Nibiru doesn't really matter all too much as long as you search the trap before you get hit by it. But this card can like serve as a called by the grave of sorts. It doesn't work on chainable things like Ash Blossom, Effect Failure, Permanence, like Gamma. So I wouldn't purely call it a called by the grave, but its ability to like, it shines really well if you open it on your opponent's turn. It's just so hard to see this card. But I felt it was worth playing at 2. And I think it's a fine card. I sided out going second consistently though. Like maybe the new card, they're still missing one card, is so good. If it's really good, I would easily cut these two and the upstart before anything else in the list. So yeah. And then we have Desires. I play Desires because, like I said, I want the draw effects. I think the draw effects and the +1s allow this deck to pick up speed where it otherwise wouldn't have it. Like I said, if you could, there are enough good cards in your deck that if you draw into them, like let's say you draw like 3 copies of Imperm, an Ash Blossom, and a Sophia. If you draw into the quick play spell, Rhoda, a Sensage, Arm Sage, the Trap, or Stellar or Elise or Nefariousness, you have a play. So that's like over half your deck. So I felt like the +1 was just better than the digging at the current time. If the new card is pushed for this deck and allows it to like make a play consistently without the need for hard drawing and Exceed Summon play, absolutely. I would cut this for disparity. Although even then, like I said, the extra deck is really tight. Utopic Sage is really strong. It allows you to make an additional Exceed play if you can ever make it. Usually it's made in situations where you have one rank 4 and an extra body. So let's say you make Capistel, you could not Capistel, let's say you have you open 3 card combo, something like this. A hand like this works. So you do this. We're going to normal summon. We're going to normal summon a lane. And then we're going to special summon this, right? Use a lane's effect. Put back Sophia. Arm Sage is really good. I mean, Utopic Sage is really good here because it allows you to extend out of a one-turn play quite a bit. So you summon out one of them. It doesn't matter which one you summon. You make Michael, and you search the trap. Because the trap is the, like I said, the trap is the best card. Then now that you have that in your hand, you make the Utopic Future Dragon. Boom. That's why I like Arm Sage. It allows you to make that card a lot easier turn 1. Then you draw 2. This kind of sucks, but it is what it is. Technically, like, I think it's just a really good card for this engine. I think this is the best rank 4 engine this deck specifically could be playing. I tried Onomot. I think this is better than Onomot. I think this is better than the other engine, the poker engine that some people are trying out. I think it's better than Time Thief. It's small, it's compact, and it combos with itself as long as you don't open 2 of these. And it even has an E-Telly that allows you to make Future Dragon easier. So I absolutely prefer this card. I play 1 Gaga Gaga Magician for the same reason. Because if you don't make Utopic Future Dragon turn 1, you can make this card turn 2, summon back any of these from the graveyard, and then just make Utopic Future Dragon. And then, like, you're good. Because it's a negate, and like it could also just have 4,000 attack for some reason with this card. And yeah. 1 Tornado Dragon. Deck has a huge problem with back row. That's another reason I actually quite like this card. It helps them. It technically outs back row when they attack, which is pretty good, you know. Because it can kind of protect Zeus. Like if your opponent has like something like an infinite impermanence, or they're saving something for Zeus, you could like proc it early with this card. It's a cool card. All right, I'll give it the benefit of the doubt, but it's by no means necessary. I'm gonna say that right now. So yeah, I play the 1 Tornado Dragon just for back row that can combo into Zeus. You could technically play Knight for a Phoenix, but you know, this asshole right here, you know, you have to play 2 copies of Zeus. The way I see it, this deck can't go second. Well, it can go second. The deck can go second completely off of the back of Zeus. Zeus and Michael, because Michael's banish effect is live going second. So you can summon Michael, search the trap, banish something, attack, make Zeus, wipe the board, then set the trap. So like, and if you don't even need to wipe the board, then it's even better that because you get to keep the trap and you have Zeus. Then on your opponent's turn, when they start building a board, you flip the trap, chain Zeus, send the trap and wipe the board, and then you summon out your 2 bodies. So like, I think 2 Zeus is necessary. You can't play 1. You need 2. Whether or not you need 3 is up for debate, but I know for sure you need 2. Because this is how you this is what you do with your monsters after the initial turn. You summon them. Because if you're not making Utopic Future Dragon, they kind of just sit there, right? They've used their effects on summon, and now they're sitting there. The only ones that do something are Capistel and Michaelis, but Usofied and Jibrin don't do anything. So they just become Zeus. So yeah, that's pretty much the deck list, the week 1 deck list. I can't wait for the last card. I am so excited for this deck. This deck is a lot of fun. It is a control deck that is interesting. It feels interactive. It's not just flip over a floodgate. You have to time your interactions, and you have to play to your opponent's tempo. It feels very much akin to something like Sky Striker, where you have to be careful with how you use your Exceed monsters. If you summon out Usofiel and you blank the graveyard, you got to make sure like that your opponent can't come back from that, or you can apply enough pressure next turn. Or if you have to make sure when you use the trap, like you don't lose the resources that you gain from it without like you lock yourself out of any sort of follow-up. There's just so much fun when it comes to thinking with this deck, and I think it's a really strong contender. It feels like it's one really good card away from being playable out of the gate. As far as how I think it compares against tier 1 Tri Brigade, I think it has a fantastic matchup against Tri Brigade going first. Can't go against Tri Brigade going second. I'm gonna say that right now. It just can't really do that. The Tri Brigade board is a little too strong. There's something like Appaloosa can be a little bit complicated to get through, especially when they have Revolt. Drytron, you absolutely you can punish Drytron going first, and that's the thing about this deck. I think it can win any matchup that's not a back row heavy matchup going first, because its mechanic is just so naturally broken. But going second, it is complete feast or famine with Zeus. Either Zeus cleans the board up or you lose right there. If Zeus does not win you that game, or Michael into Zeus doesn't win you that game, you're probably losing going second. And it's just not consistent enough to hang with tier 1. But I do think there's a lot of potential here, just because the mechanic is so inherently broken. I wanted to also talk about... darn, it was just at the tip of my tongue. It was important too. Dang it. Oh man, this always happens when I'm recording, because I think of this one important thing. It was just there. I was just thinking about it too, and now I forgot. I tried this engine out down here. I didn't like it. You don't play enough tuners. I thought these 6 hand traps would have like been enough, that like you could get a free 5300 with 2 pops on board, 3 if you desperately need it. Never really comes up, like, ever. Just not enough cards that put cards on your board. Oh, right, I know what I wanted to talk about. So a lot of people have been complaining about the effects that they all have to proc on your opponent's turn, and they're like, can we get a card that forces your opponent to, you know, do something in their graveyard? I don't think that's needed. Like, you saw it in the replay, and it's true of all decks, just because of how modern Yu-Gi-Oh plays out. Your opponent has to activate an effect that will proc these guys to play the Yu-Gi-Oh. They just have to. The only way you play against a deck that doesn't have to do that is like stun turbo, like set traps, pass. In which case that would suck. But again, in that case, you're probably not forcing your opponent to banish something from your graveyard anyway. And even if you do, these cards don't really affect back row all too much. Michael is really the only one that can interact with back row, and that's only on the turn she summoned. So like, you just end up in a situation where back row screws you. But if you're not playing in a back row based matchup and you're playing against literally anything else, this deck just slaps. Like, this card right here feels broken. Like, it feels the worst parts of Tri-Brigade Revolt, because you don't have to set it up. You just have to have it. You could draw this card and your opponent goes Pikachu face the minute they activate something as innocuous as Monster Reborn, or a World Legacy Guard Dragon, or a freaking Kurasp effect to Link Summon, and you're just like, in that case, you would have to flip beforehand. You have to put them on board to deter your opponent. But like, as soon as you Revolt itself, you activate this card in response to an effect that moves something from the graveyard, and your opponent's like, did I just lose the game? And they probably just did. So yeah, like, I don't think this deck needs anything to accelerate that mechanic. I think the deck needs a consistency card. It either needs a Rhoda would be fine. I would take a Rhoda. I would take an E-Telly. Anything that gets these girls out of your deck onto the board. Another 3 copies of the best of your cards would be fine. I'd prefer an E-Telly, but like, it's fine. Or I'd prefer a Pendulum Call. I think a Pendulum Call would be very cool, because they technically have a Pendulum Call in an E-Telly with this card, where you get a pair. So you either get Elise and Stella, or you get Elaine and Sophia. Give them a Pendulum Call that searches that pair, and it'll be even better, because then you'll have a 1-card Exceed play, because that's what the trap is. The trap is a 1-card Exceed play, but it can technically be 2 depending on how you use it. But a Rhoda will only ever be 1, just because it's a spell card. But it'll be a perfect starter for this deck. Like, and that's pretty much all I've got to say about this deck. I think this deck is fantastic. I think it's a lot of fun. I would definitely be picking this up in paper. This will be my second pet deck, behind Dragon Maid. I'm going to be a dedicated theory crafter for this strategy. I love these cards. I love their artwork. I fuck with nuns. I fuck with war nuns to the hardest. I love the dresses. I love it all. Like, this deck, It looks good. It actually plays like a lot of fun. It uses a mechanic that's not freaking Link Vomit. I get to play with Exceeds monsters. I haven't really played Exceeds since I was playing, you know, Utopia well before they got all the good support, like 2015 Utopia. So I'm so excited for the Exosister archetype. Konami, please don't like screw me with the support that this deck gets, and please don't screw me with the freaking TCG localized name. You'll be seeing a lot more from me, especially with this deck. There'll be a follow-up video to this one once the last card is revealed, if it's any good. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one. Take care. Bye.